Hello, my name's Joel Hargis with the Florida Aviation Network, and we are here at Sun and Fun 21. And I'll tell you what, the weather this week has been fantastic. If you haven't been out here this week, you need to plan to come. We have today and of course Saturday and Sunday, and I would really encourage everybody to get out here. Welcome to the show this morning. I want to introduce somebody that's going to be so interesting to talk to, and particularly for you pilots out there, I think you'll learn a lot about what we should and should not do up there. I'm going to talk with Lieutenant Colonel Trevor Boswell. And Trevor, you are with Norad.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And give me, the 10,000-foot view of what Norad does for us.
Sure. Well, you've got the National Airspace System. It kind of covers all of North America, and that's our job. We're to protect North America, essentially, and all of the National Airspace System associated with it.
So protecting the national airspace. So obviously with 9/11 and stuff, that job got a little more critical, did it not?
Yeah, it did, and it was an eye-opener, obviously, for everyone, but it did show some gaps in our procedures and our coordination level with local agencies, and so that was kind of the catalyst for where we are today. But we've been doing this for 50, 60 years now, and that was kind of the genesis of our procedures today and a lot of the stuff that we'll probably talk about.
So let's talk about you for just a minute. So you're a lieutenant colonel in the Air Force.
Yes.
And we've chatted a little bit. So Trevor's a pilot. Tell him what you fly.
I flew F-16s, and now I fly a desk, unfortunately. But yeah, F-16s, a lot of fun.
F-16. So you're killing me, man. I'd give anything to do that. And so you've been stationed around the globe a few spots.
I have. I started my training career at Shepherd Air Force Base in North Texas, Wichita Falls, and then from there I went to F-16 training outside of Phoenix, Arizona, and then my first duty assignment was Northern Japan, Misawa Air Base. And then from there I went to Alaska, outside of Fairbanks, Alaska, and Eielson Air Force Base, and then back to Luke Air Force Base in Phoenix as an instructor, and then finally finished my flying career in Hill Air Force Base in Utah.
And on a 1 to 10 scale, flying the F-16 around the world like that?
About an 18. Maybe 24, give or take.
That's great.
That's right.
That is just great. All right, so I know we're here to talk about NORAD, and for most of us pilots out there, where we get to meet you guys is if we bust some airspace, right? We bust a TFR. We are basically somewhere we are not supposed to be. Mm-hmm. We meet a couple of America's finest off the wing of our aircraft. Is that?
Yeah, typically, and obviously not the most ideal way to introduce or be introduced to Air Force assets, but that's the whole reason we're here today, is to hopefully avoid those kind of interactions. And so hopefully you can meet a NORAD pilot here at an air show in a benign environment, be able to ask some questions as opposed to being startled by an airplane off your wing trying to get you to go someplace.
So let me ask you, first of all, what are the most common mistakes? When do you guys, alert and go out and start chasing an air? What's the most common situations that people make that they should avoid?
I think the most common kind of blanket statement is ignorance, and that's the baseline thing that we're trying to fix. Is we want everybody to be as aware of the airspace changes as possible. So that means check the basic stuff, do your basic flight planning, check the NOTAMs, and there's TFR NOTAMs as well. And so checking those are the first step to success and not being intercepted, which is not only a risk to your certificate, but it's also very expensive. As a taxpayer, we pay our taxes, and we estimate it's about $100,000 every time an Air Force asset is launched to intercept somebody. And it's a very pricey business, and so we try to avoid that if we can by doing the right flight planning ahead of time.
So there's obviously many TFRs. The one we're most common with is the presidential TFR.
Correct.
I'm sure you guys take that one very, very seriously.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Keep a real close eye on.
Well, we keep a close eye on everything, obviously, but yeah, those ones are, obviously very highlighted in the NOTAMs and
they're the easiest to bust, quite frankly, because they pop up and they go down and
they do.
And so do your homework, right?
That's exactly right. Do your homework, and it's obviously not just presidential TFRs. We have the UN General Assembly that receives one. Major sporting events and those types of gatherings will also potentially receive one as well. So, it's just keeping your eyes out, your ears out, and listening out for any sort of changes to the local airspace.
So, and I know another one, particularly flying around Florida, we have some pretty serious restricted areas. And some of those restricted areas go hot and go cold.
They do.
And that's more for our pilot safety, because there's fast movers coming in and out of there, and
correct.
So nobody gets hit. But I know I can think of one up in northeast Florida, north of Jacksonville. There is a do not cross the line ring at a big sub base up there.
Yeah, there's prohibited areas, which are the ones that you're never supposed to go in. There's warning areas, there's MOAs, there's restricted areas, and all of those have different entry and exit procedures, and some are available for general aviation aircraft to transit, and some are not. And it just depends on the time, whether the airspace is active with whoever owns that airspace's aircraft and whatnot. But at NORAD, we're primarily focused on the TFRs, like you said, and the ADIS procedures for coming into and out of the country. And so those are all handled differently. They're not necessarily a no-go item. It is just you must have done your homework ahead of time, coordinated with the air traffic control agency in that vicinity, and make sure you're following the procedures.
And so that sub base, which is a prohibited area, and it's not huge, but if you're traveling up the East Coast, it's pretty easy to bust that airspace. Do you guys alert on that? I mean, if somebody, or maybe they're circling there, maybe. So what gets you guys off the ground for something like that?
Well, we'll talk with respect to the TFRs, and those are typically a 2-ring situation. So there's a 30-mile ring, which is kind of the warning area, if you will, and then there's the prohibited area inside of the 10-mile ring. And so the outer ring, the 30-mile ring, we may or may not launch someone depending on how threatening they appear. And that's kind of the common theme with us, is we have no idea. And that was one of the things that was highlighted with 9/11, was we have no idea what the intentions of the person at the controls of that aircraft are. And that was one of our weak spots before, and it is one of those things that we're never really going to know until we are able to get eyes on with an actual airplane, or they are talking to us on the radio. And it's typically, they go Norad. They lose the communications with air traffic control. They just don't realize there's a TFR that's active at that point. And then there's the people that are trying to go someplace. They think they're doing the right procedures, and it just so happens they aren't at that moment. So talking to air traffic control, in addition to filing the correct flight plan, and then monitoring guard frequency 121.5 is huge in preventing us having to launch an aircraft to intercept
back up on that one. So I didn't know that. So if you're listening to 21.5, which is the emergency frequency, that's where we go if something really bad happens on our side.
Yeah.
So if you're near a TFR, you could maybe listen to 121.5. Is that
in
the
all
frequency
actuality, the hope is that you're always monitoring that frequency, because you never know if your radio quits until you haven't heard somebody talk to you for a few minutes.
Right.
And so if you're always monitoring it, then at least they have a way to reach you, because air traffic control is going to try to reach out to you as well.
Right?
And if they can't get a hold of you, then that fighter on your wing is going to be talking to you on 121.5. Yes, sir.
I did not know that. Yep. So pilots, write that one down. If you got somebody off your wing and he's trying to talk to you, he's on 121.5, the emergency frequency. I did not know that.
Yep.
And fortunately, I haven't had a fighter off my wing, and I hope I never do. But so now let's go to step 2. You screwed up, next thing you know, and you got an Air Force jet off your wing. What's he gonna do, and what should we as pilots do?
All right, so what he's gonna do, he's gonna show up on the wing, and we always launch them as 2 ships. So just because you see one next to you doesn't mean that there's not one about 2 miles.
6 o'clock.
About 2 miles behind you, waiting to see what you're going to do next, all right? So the biggest things we tell pilots are, 1, remain predictable. Don't do anything unsafe, all right? We don't want you to inadvertently put yourself in a bad situation. And then follow the instructions. And so what we'll do at our booth, we're in Hangar A, booth 85, And we have cards that we'll pass out, in addition to when we go brief here at Sun and Fun, that we're passing out these cards. And they have all the intercept procedures and what you as a general aviation pilots are supposed to do when you've been intercepted. But the idea is, again, remain predictable and follow the instructions. He's going to wag his wings to get your attention. He may even, if he has to, and you are starting to get too close to that 10-mile ring, which is the no-kidding protected airspace that you're prohibited from entering, he may cut across your nose, and he's going to be 500, maybe 1,000 feet in front of you, offset in altitude so that you're not going to run into a jet wash issue. And he may put flares out there as well. And that turn in front of your nose is the direction that he wants you to follow. And so all you have to do is just turn your wings, maybe 30, 45 degrees a bank, and follow him out. And granted, he's in a jet fighter. He's going to be going pretty quick, but he will slow down as much as he's possibly able to. And just because you're going maybe 80 knots doesn't mean that he can't go that slow as well.
Right? That was going to be my next question, is like if you're putting along in a little 150 or something, and can the 150 keep up, right?
Well, yeah, so do your best to go where he's going to go, but he's going to start weaving, and basically that's to help maintain that separation. But we're going to take you to the most logical airport available, and then we're going to put you on a final flight path and have you land at that location.
So he'll basically just fly in front of you right down.
Correct.
And will he land in front of you?
No,
or
he will not land.
He's going to do a go around.
He will do a low approach, and your clearance to land, if you're not already speaking with that tower frequency, is when that fighter puts his gear down. That means that you are cleared to land and you're cleared to execute a landing at that location.
No kidding. That's fascinating.
Yes,
so
sir.
those are the cues.
That's right.
Never heard that, never knew that, and I would bet 90% of the pilots out there have no clue of that.
And that's why we hand that card out, because it is kind of buried in the FAR when it comes to the procedures and how you're supposed to follow and do things responsibly as a pilot, if the worst has happened.
Have you ever done any chases like that?
I have not had the, I guess the opportunity, we'll call it, yes.
All right. Well, like I say, I have certainly not had the opportunity to do that. So let's just take it one step further. And I do want to back up a little bit. So for me, when I fly, I'm always talking and squawking, right? I mean, I'm generally IFR, but sometimes VFR, but I'm still talking and squawking.
Yes.
So ATC is, if you're doing what they tell you, you shouldn't be in that situation.
Correct, yeah, and just because there is a TFR there doesn't mean that you can't go inside that 30-mile ring. You just have to be squawking the appropriate frequency and then complying with ATC's instructions.
So yeah, I mean, in Florida we get a lot of presidential TFRs, particularly over the last 4 years.
Yes.
In South Florida, it's been difficult to get in and out of some airports.
Absolutely.
And but again, that 30-mile ring, as long as you're not in that 10-mile ring, is that a 10-mile?
That's correct.
Ring? So if you're on a flight plan and you're talking and squawking, you can actually land in that 30-mile ring generally?
That's correct,
or fly through it?
Or fly through it if you have to, exactly.
All right, and basically at the direction of ATC.
That's correct.
Don't ever do that on your own.
No.
Right, okay. Well, golly, I'm just hoping we never have to do that. So where is, when I think of NORAD, I think of Cheyenne Mountain.
That's correct.
In Colorado Springs.
And traditionally that was in the past the case. And if you've ever seen the movie War Games, that's kind of the idea behind it. You'd walk into the tunnel, into a giant mountain. There's a giant room with big TV screens, and that's where our folks are monitoring. But we have since moved to Peterson Air Force Base, which is co-located at Colorado Springs International Airport. And a lot of that is just due to mission requirements, additional space and whatnot. But yeah, we're now at Peterson Air Force Base in a regular building, and we do the exact same job.
Do they still utilize Cheyenne Mountain?
They do. It's a contingency operation at this point for NORAD specific operations, but it is a 24/7 operation for other.
So in emergency, go
Correct.
to the cave kind of thing.
Correct. Yep.
Yeah. Well, gosh, you guys keep us safe and perform such a valuable mission. Golly, I feel better just sitting here.
Well, it's very rewarding, and you go throughout the year again, 24/7, 365, and there's a lot of important things that are going on behind the scenes that the general public doesn't always get to see. But one of the great things that we get to do is help Santa navigate the national airspace system and cross the international borders and transit the ADIS and everything else as well. And he's a pilot just like everybody else, so he's got to follow the same rules that everybody else does.
Yep. making sure Santa doesn't bust any airspace. And
that's right.
Gets his job done.
Those presents got to get there.
Because he's moving pretty fast.
He's going quick. He is definitely going quick. But we work with our partners up in Canada, so he can transit through Alaska, through to Canada, and then down to the lower 48 in the United States, and then on to the other countries around the world that he is visiting. So it's very important that we make sure he does that safely.
Does NORAD do any support for our bases around the world, or just really U.S. soil?
Our primary responsibility is North America, but we do coordination with other countries as needed, both for procedural changes, working with international controlling agencies and that kind of thing.
So can you tell me, do you have a global visual ability?
There are other assets that are looking at other things around the country, and NORAD is so much more than just the aviation assets that we've talked about today. We do work with Customs and Border Patrol, the Secret Service, the Capitol Police, and if anybody's from the DC area, you know about the Special Flight Rules area. That is like a permanent TFR essentially, and all these procedures that are associated with it. It's its own separate kind of entity, and within that area you have the DC Air National Guard who fly F-16s, but you also have the Coast Guard helicopters for the slow-moving traffic that we may have to use as well, and so that would potentially be a different type of aircraft asset that you see after
So you're coordinating with all those entities?
Absolutely. Them and so many more. It's a joint facility, so we work with the Navy, the Army, and the Canadians to do everything we can to protect all the national airspace system and all the borders within North America.
So, like I say, you're kind of living the dream that a lot of kids would like to do.
Very fortunate.
Let me ask you, did you learn to fly in the Air Force?
I actually got my civilian private pilot's license prior to after entering the Air Force, but prior to attending pilot training in the Air Force.
And how old were you when you soloed?
20, mental math here, 23, I guess.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So you were a little older.
A little older. I've always been exposed to aviation. I just never caught the bug super early and was always doing sports and whatnot, but caught it and it's never left.
What'd you solo in?
The Piper Warrior. PA-28.
That's funny. I did my check ride in a Warrior.
There you go. Yeah. Great airplane.
I always like to bring that out just to show these guys are human. I mean, you know what I mean? They started, most of them started like everybody else, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so that's great. What else? So you're here at Sun and Fun. Do you do this every year we have it?
Every year, yeah. We were obviously last year was a disappointment that we weren't able to attend, but yeah, we're back. We're here, and we go to as many public air shows as we possibly can to work with general aviation pilots and to, again, like I said, hopefully avoid ever having to be intercepted. It's, we kind of joke it's a one-time air show that may or may not end with you still being able to legally fly. So that's
right.
That's kind of the challenge there. Is we love to get the airplanes out there and shown to the public, but in a controlled setting that's not going to get you in trouble.
Right. Oh golly. So. In your career path, what's next for you?
So I left active duty towards the end of 2015, and I'm now in the Air Force Reserves, and I'm a part-timer, and I fly for a major airline on the outside. But just continuing this. I've only been at NORAD for about a year and a half, and so usually it's about a 2 to 3 year stint in a job. So I'll probably do this for about another year and a half, and then we'll see. I'm about 17 and a half years in, and so I'm kind of reaching the end of my 20-year timeline, which is a typical military service for a retirement. But you know what? I'm having fun, and I've always said as long as I'm having fun, I'll stay in until they kick me out. So that's my plan as of right now.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, that's a great message. I tell you what, you have I would call an unusual call sign. Your call sign is boat?
That's correct, yeah.
All right, got to hear this.
So I'm not in the Navy, obviously, but somehow I got boat as a call sign. So in the call sign game, you usually get call signs for something that's funny with your name itself, or you really most likely you've done something stupid, and that's the thing that I did. So in the F-16 and really all fighter aircraft, when the weather's poor. we have a radar in front of us, and we can lock onto the person in front of us on our departures. And we call that a radar-assisted trail departure. And that's solely designed to keep us in a formation where that once we get above the weather, we can rejoin visually and fly out to the training airspace.
Oh, really? I didn't know. I wondered always how you did that through IMC.
Yeah, so that's with a radar. It's assisted so that if you don't have a radar, you can still do it, and we have pre-designed procedures to fly at the same airspeed, the same climb rates, that kind of thing. And so I'm on a training sortie, one of my first sorties flying in northern Japan, and we're on the way out to the airspace to go do some initial training. And with my flight lead, we take off. I get the radar lock, and everything's gravy. We're flying out to the airspace. It's awesome. Well, my radar is a computer, and it reset and restarted on its own. And I'm pretty new in the location, and I'm in an upgrade sortie. I get real nervous real fast. And so I'm working, thinking me as a human is going to fix this computer and make it restart any faster. We all know that's not the case.
No.
And I guess I'm so focused and task saturated on this one thing. And sure enough, I stopped paying attention to flying the airplane, right? Aviate, navigate, communicate.
That's
I
right.
forgot the aviate part. I definitely forgot the navigate part. And I absolutely forgot the communicate part. And so, boom, I'm focused on this. And I forget that my power is at full military power. As I'm accelerating, I think I'm going to stop at 350 knots like prescribed. I accelerate to 450 knots, and I continue my climb. I don't say anything to my flight lead, which I should have. I should have called blind. I did not. And so what ended up being me supposed to be about 2 miles in trail, I ended about 2 miles in front of him. And his first indication that something was wrong was I flew about 50 feet over top of him, and the first thing that he realized was a loud noise from my jet exhaust right over top of him. So when I do finally say something, I'm 2 miles in front of him, and he was a little bit sarcastic, I guess, with his response. He's like, yeah, I know. I was just waiting for you to see how long it was going to take. So for my buffoonery, as we like to call it, my call sign is blind on assisted trail or boat.
Blind on assisted trail.
That's right.
Awesome story. Well, I'll tell you what, Trevor, we're out of time.
Yeah.
It's been just a pleasure to talk to you. I learned a ton,
Right.
you know, and I think a lot of pilots out there don't know this procedure. They can, again, stop by and see you at
Hangar A.
Hangar A, here at Sun and Fun. Sun and Fun 21. Come out. It's a beautiful day. The Blue Angels are going to be here this afternoon and tomorrow. Please come out and see us at Sun and Fun 21.